I think I'm at Yud Gimel base. Is that right?
I've got Yud base Vav,
I'm sorry, Yud base Vav?
starting with Yud base Vav, yes.
Okay, so I went too far. Yud base Vav is right here. If she performed Kalitza before two judges or before three, but it was discovered that one was a relative or one was disqualified, her Kalitza is not valid. But Reb Shimon and Reb Yochanan the Sandla validated. It once happened that someone performed Kalitza when only he and she were present in a prison. And the case came before Rabbi Akiva.
Wait. No, that was hey. I wanted Vav. Okay, never mind. It's fine.
Okay. The commander of Kalitza is performed. The commandment of Kalitza is performed as follows: he and his Yevama come to the court, and they give him advice appropriate to him, as it is said. And the elders of a city shall summon him and speak to him. She then says, "My husband's brother refuses to establish a name for his brother in Israel, and he is not willing to take me in Yibum." And he says, "I do not want to take her." They said this is in the holy language. Then his brother's wife shall approach him in the presence of the elders and remove his shoe from his foot and spit before him. Spittle discernible to the judges, and she shall declare, saying, "So should be done to the man who would not build his brother's house." They used to dictate only until this point, but when Reb Harkanos dictated under the Ela tree, that's the wrong word, Ela tree in the village of Etam, and completed the entire chapter, it became the established custom to complete the entire chapter. And his name shall be called in Israel the house of the one whose shoe was removed. The commandment is incumbent upon the judges and not upon the disciples. Rabbi Yehuda says the commandment is incumbent upon all those standing there to say, the one whose shoe was removed, the one whose shoe was removed, and the one whose shoe was removed. Okay, Yud Gimel Aleph. Beis Shammai says only those who are betrothed may refuse, but Beis Hillel says both those who are betrothed and those who are married may refuse. Beis Shammai says only the husband may be refused, but not the Yavam. While Beis Hillel says both the husband and the Yavam may be refused. Beis Shammai says refusal may be only made in the presence, but Beis Hillel says it may be made whether in his presence or not. Beis Shammai says only in court. Beis Hillel says whether in court or not or out of court. Beis Hillel says to Beis Shammai, she may refuse while a minor, even 4 or 5 times. And Beis Shammai replied, the daughters of Israel are not to be created as promiscuous. Rather, she may refuse and wait until adulthood, or refuse until and marry. Who is the minor's wife who must refuse? Anyone whose mother or brother gave her in marriage with her consent. If they gave her in marriage without her consent, she does not need to refuse. Reb Kanina ben Atigno says any child who is unable to guard her betrothal object need not refuse. Reb Eliezer says a minor's act is void. It is as if she had been seduced. A Yisrael's daughter married to a Kohen may not eat truma, and a Kohen's daughter married to a Yisrael may eat truma. Okay, good.
All right. So the next 3 Mishnas, I'll be honest, I haven't actually prepared them, so we'll just we might have to work through them together. Mishnah Gimel, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, Kol hakava shehi min ha'ish. If the in other words, the reason why his minor wife doesn't want to live with him is because of him. Then it's because it's like she is his wife. Which means that she is so it says here in Gemara, the Amoraim explicitly disagree about the words of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Shmuel says that if other people wanted to marry her while she was still married to her husband. So remember with the situation we're dealing with here is a minor orphan. Right, her father's dead, and her mother and brothers gave her in marriage to this other man. Okay, and some other guy takes a fancy to her and says, "Well, don't you want to be married to me? Rather, I've got nicer candies." Okay, and she said, and she says, "No, I don't want to marry you. I'm happy with my husband." Okay. Because she wants to remain with her husband, so that's an akava because of the man. That's the reason why she doesn't want to leave him, is because she likes the man. במחמס טעם אחר, כגון מחמס בני אדם שאינם מוגנים לה. But if it's because of the other person, if it's because she specifically doesn't like the man who's asking, who's trying to entice her, zoi akava she'ena minash. So this is an akava that's not from the husband. In other words, the parish zeba Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov lelamed. If the reason why she wants to stay with her husband is because she likes him, in other words, she hasn't refused him, and her din is like his wife, and she still needs a mion. But if the refusal to go to this other guy is for an external reason, since she's already revealed her intention that if it wasn't for this other reason, she would have left her husband. So this is actually interpreted as a mion in itself, and she's not, and it's like she's not married to him. Like when the second guy comes to her and says, "Don't you want to come to me?" and she says, "No, your candies are pooey," right? So what she's saying is that it's not because she's happy with her husband, it's just because that this other guy isn't offering her a good enough offer.
Yeah.
So therefore, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is interpreting this as she's saying I don't really want to stay with this man. Okay, Abaye bar Avin Barav Chanina bar Avin Parashim. So there's a different parish which is not the same as Shmuel, which is Nasan Laget Zohi Akavashi Shehi Menaish. So it's when he gave her a get, that's called an akava from the husband. Since she hasn't refused, since she never refused him, so this is even before she's 12 years old. Okay, so since she hasn't refused him, so therefore she has shown her das that she wants to stay with him. Okay, but it was dependent on him, and he gave her a get, and therefore she is and therefore now she is asur to his relatives, and he's asur to her relatives because it's clear she was his wife. And I would add to that also now that she's a divorcee, she's not allowed to marry a kohen. Mianavo, but if she did mion zohi akavashi enaminash. So, but if she refused him beforehand, then it's as if she was never his wife. And so this is a simpler sort of pshat over here. It doesn't involve any third party coming to try and entice her away. So therefore, if she refuses him before she grows up, then he's mutter to her relatives, she's mutter to his relatives, and furthermore, she'd be allowed to marry a kohen. Okay, so if he perished the back Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov hakdim klal adanim al-fartim Mishna. Okay, so this is apparently is a hakdama to the coming Mishnah. Okay, so now the second parish is apparently the one that's accepted by most of the Mefarshim, not like Shmuel, but like the other Amoraim who say that it's a simple case that we're talking about. If it's an akava, the akava is from the man, in other words, he divorces her. It's either she was his wife, but if she refuses him, then she was never his wife. Okay, the Mishnah Dalet Hamnama Enes Ba'ish. If a girl does mion on a man, who motar v'krova seha, so he's motar to marry her relatives, so he motar is v'krova. And she's motar to marry his relatives. And she's not possible from Kuhana. Nasan laget, if he gave her a get, who asur v'krovasehav, who he asur v'krovav, who pesalah mina Kuhana. So it's video what we just explained, that if he gave her the get, then it's clear they were married, even if this get happened before she was 12. Nasan laget zira. If he gave her a get and then returned it and then said, you know what, I've changed my mind, let's get married again. Okay, and then she refused him and became and married another man, and then she was widowed or divorced. Then she is actually still allowed to return to him because it's clear she was never married to him in the first place, right? Because she did the mion on him. So therefore, there's the issue of the man returning his grusha after she's been married to somebody in the interim. But here, she was married to somebody else in the interim, but she was never married to him in the first place because she did a mion on him, and it appears that the mion even negates the previous marriage that was from the get. Remember, he gave her a get first. However, if she first refused him and then returns to him, nasan la get, and then he divorced her. And then she was married to somebody else. And then she was widowed or divorced. Then she's not allowed to return to him because the last thing that happened was the get. If the mion, whatever the last thing is the one that defines what the relationship was. That if it ended with a get, then it was a real marriage, and if it ended with a mion, then it was never a marriage in the first place. Okay. So if a girl refuses a man and she goes and marries another man, the gersha, and he divorces her. La'acher, she goes and marries another man, ume'anabo, and she does mion on him. La'acher v'gersha, and another one, and he divorces her. La'acher ume'anabo. So we get it. We get the picture. She's going and marrying a lot of people and either refusing them or getting divorced. Anyone that she left from with a get, she's asked to return to him because that marriage was considered a real marriage. But if she left him by mion, then she is allowed to return to him because the marriage was retroactively cancelled. Okay.
Wait, it was canceled. Okay. Okay. We're going back now.
Yeah.
I have
Mishna Aleph.
I'm sorry.
Perik Yud Mishna Aleph.
Okay. Oh, this is the one, the very long one. I remember. Okay. A woman whose husband went overseas and they came and told her, your husband died, and she married, and afterwards her husband came back, she must leave both of them. And she needs to receive a bill of divorce from each, and she receives neither the ketubah, nor payment for the fruits, nor sustenance, and nor worn property from either. If she took payment from either, she must return it. Her child by either is a mamzer. Neither of them may contaminate himself to her, and neither has rights to her found objects or the products of her labor, or the nullification of her vows. If she was the daughter of a Yisrael, she is disqualified from marrying into the priesthood. If the daughter of a Levi, she is disqualified from eating tithe, and if the daughter of a Kohen, she's disqualified from eating truma. The heirs of both men do not inherit the ketubah, and if they should die, the brother of each performs chalitza, but not yibum. Rabbi Yossi says her ketubah claim is on her first husband's property. But Elazar says the first one has the rights to her found objects, the products of her labor, and the nullification of her vows. Rabbi Shimon says cohabitation of chalitza with the first one's brother, Rizis, her co-wife, and her child by him is not a mamzer. If she married without sanction of the court, she may return to him. If she married by the court sanction, she must leave, but is exempt from the sacrifice. If she did not marry by the court sanction, she must leave and is obligated to bring the sacrifice. The power of the court is effective in exempting her from the sacrifice. If the court ruled that she may marry and she went and acted immorally, she is obligated to bring the sacrifice since they only permitted her to marry. A woman whose husband and son went overseas and they came back and told her, your husband died and then your son, and she married and afterwards they told her that the reverse had occurred, she must leave her husband, and any child born before or after is a mamzer. If they told her your son died and then your husband, and she underwent yibum with and afterward they told her that the reverse had occurred, she must leave her husband, and any child born before or after is a mamzer. If they told her her husband died and she married, and afterwards they told her he was alive, but he was alive then, but now he is dead, she must leave her husband, and any child before is a mamzer, and any child born after is not a mamzer. If they told her your husband died and she was then betrothed, and then her husband reappeared, she may return to him even if the last one gave her a bill of divorce. He does not disqualify her from the priesthood. If Elazar ben Masya expounded the following: a woman divorced from her husband, but not a woman divorced from a man who is not her husband. Okay. All right. Hagiga, we have Yud Aleph. Aleph. All are obligated in Riyah, except for a deaf person, an imbecile, a minor, a person of undetermined sex, a hermaphrodite, women, slaves who have not been freed, the lame, the blind, the infirm, the aged, and the one who is unable to ascend by foot. Who is deemed a minor? And whoever cannot ride on his father's shoulders and ascend from Jerusalem to the Temple Mount. These are the words of Beit Shammai. Beis Hillel says, whoever cannot hold his father's hand and ascend from Jerusalem to the Temple Mount, for the verse states 3 pilgrimages. Beit Shammai,
what you must have there is the double entendre of the Shalosh Regalim. It's got to be on his legs that he comes up. So
right.
Beis Hillel sort of ups the age limit to say if a child can't walk by himself holding his father's hand, he's patur. He can't come on his own legs. Yeah.
Shammai says the Olas Riyah must be worth at least 2 silver maos, and the Shalmei Kagiga at least 1 silver ma. Beis Hillel says the Olas Riyah must be worth at least 1 silver ma, and the Shalmei Kagiga at least 2 silver maos. Okay. We have Yoma, and
there's another Mishna in Chagiga. You need to do Gimel.
Oh, that's right. I was going. Right. That's right. Spell it. Okay. Olos, which are not obligatory, may be brought during Kol HaMoed. All olos may be brought only from the unconsecrated funds, while shalom may be purchased with right money. I know. Concerning the chigah brought on the first day of Pesach, Beis Shammai says it may be purchased only with the unconsecrated money. Beis Hillel says it may be purchased with tithe money. Okay.
That's a shiny money, yeah. Okay. Yoma.
We have Beis Hay. The daily sacrifice was offered with 9 kohanim, or with 10, or with 11, or with 12, no less and no more. How so? The sacrifice itself was 9. On Sukkot, one held a flask of water in his hand, thus we have 10. In the afternoon with 11, the sacrifice itself was 9, plus 2 who held 2 logs in their hands. On Sabbath with 11, the sacrifice itself was 9, plus 2 who held the 2 spoons of frankincense and the panim bread in their hands. And on the Sabbath, during Sukkot, one held a flask of water in his hand. A ram was offered with 7, the meat with 5, the 10 intestines with fine flour, and the wine with 2 of each. And there's one more. An ox was offered with 24, the head and the hind leg, the head with 1 and the hind leg with 2, the tail and the hind leg with the tail with 2 and the hind leg with 2, the breast and the neck, the breast with 1 and the neck with 3, the 2 forelegs with 2, the 2 sides with 2, the intestines with the fine flour, and the wine with 3 each. In which cases are the above applied? For communal sacrifices, but for personal sacrifices, if he wanted to offer, he may do so. The flaying, the section of these and of those are the same.
Okay.
We have if one gathers fresh, right, if one gathers fresh herbs until the moisture has dried up, and if one gathers dry until the second rainfall, leaves of reeds and of the vines until they fall from the stems, and if one gathers dry until the second rainfall, Rabbi Akiva says, all of them until the second rainfall. Likewise, if one lets a house to his fellow until the rains and the second rainfall, until the second rainfall, if one vowed not to derive any benefit from his fellow until the rains, until the second rainfall, until when may the poor enter the orchards, until the second rainfall, and from when on may one make use of burned straw and stubble of the 7th year, from the second rainfall. If one had produce of the 7th year and beer Torah arrived He allowed foods for 3 meals for each, and the poor may eat after beer, but not the rich. So says Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi says both the poor and the rich may eat after both. Okay, we are at Kalim. Base head test. A porter's cushion is susceptible to becoming tameh with midrash tumah. A wine strainer is not subject to the tumah of a seat. The hairnet of an old woman is susceptible to becoming tameh with midrash tumah, and the shirt of a baby harlot that was fashioned like netting is not susceptible to tumah. Let's see something. Okay, but I said the wrong thing here. Did I say the shirt of a baby harlot?
I didn't want to hear harlot. You'd say but the shirt of a baby. It's not a baby, but
I know. I was thinking the same thing. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't know where that came from. If one makes a garment out of a fishing net, it is tahor. But if he made it out of a net's bottom, it is tameh. But Eliezer ben Yaakov says also, if one made a garment out of a fishing net and he doubled it, it's tameh. Concerning a hairnet, if one began to make it from its rim, it remains tahor until one finishes its bottom. If one began from the bottom, it remains tahor until one finishes its rim. Its frontlet is tameh by itself. Its strings are tameh because they are considered attached to it. And if a hairnet becomes torn, it cannot contain a majority of the hair. It is tahor. One more. The threads of a sheet, of a scarf, of hats, and of a head shawl, their measure is 6 finger breadths. The threads of an undergarment, their measure is 10 finger breadths. The threads of an overcoat, of a veil, of a shirt, and of a mantle, their measure is 3 finger breadths. The fringes of an old woman's cap, of an Arab face covering, of kuchin, of a hollow belt, of a turban, of a partition, their measure is whatever the length of the fringes may be.
And
okay, Zion base. The one who was robbed, how so? They testified about him that he entered his house to take a security from him without authorization. He says, "You took my utensils," and he replies, "I did not take them." He swears and receives payment. And Yehuda says, only if there is a partial admission. How so? He says to him, "You took 2 utensils," while he replies, "I only took 1. The one who was wounded, how so? They testified about him that he entered his domain uninjured and emerged wounded. And he says to him, "You wounded me," while he says, "I did not wound you." He swears and collects. Rabbi Yehuda says, only if there is a partial admission. How so? He says to him, "You inflicted 2 wounds on me," while he replies, "I inflicted only 1 wound on you." The one whose opponent is not trusted to swear. How so? No matter whether he has falsely sworn, an oath of testimony, or an oath of deposit, or a vain oath, or if one of them was a dice player and one who lends interest, and whether they were pigeon flyers or Chavias merchants, his opponent swears and collects. If they were both suspect, the oath returns to the place. These are the words of Reb Yossi, and Reb Meir says they divide.
So the context of all this is that normally a shavua works to exempt you from a payment, where somebody comes and says, "You owe me this," and the defendant says, "I take a shavua that I don't owe you," right? And then he can exempt himself. So these mishnayos that we just read are giving the exceptional cases where a person can give a shvua in order to extract money from somebody else. Right. Okay. That's the normal mechanism is that it's a defensive mechanism, but here the shvua can be used as a collection mechanism. Okay.
Someone wanted me one time, a neighbor wanted me to make a shavua on something that had taken place.
Yeah.
And it didn't take place. I didn't do anything. And it was another neighbor or something. Anyway, I asked the rabbi about it. He said, no. He said, a shavua is a very serious thing. You just don't make a shavua. That's all.
You don't do that.
Do whatever else you want, but I'm not taking a shavua on this. So, anyway, have a great day. Feel better.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Be well. Bye.